Today, I'll explain the parents of the most popular One Piece characters. Do you know who Zoro's parents were? What about Nami's, Frankie's, or Shanks? Well, we'll cover all of those in this video, but let's first start with Luffy, who is the son of Monkey D. Dragon and an unnamed woman. We'll talk more about Luffy's mom in a bit. For some reason, Dragon decided not to raise Luffy himself and gave the boy to Garp at a very young age. This was likely because his role as the leader of the Revolutionary Army would put Luffy in constant danger, which isn't something he wanted for his son. The first time we saw Dragon in the series was during Loguetown, when he saved Luffy from Smoker. Since then, he himself hasn't really been active. But considering that he has earned the title of the world's most wanted man, he is definitely much more dangerous than he looks. Now, as far as information about Luffy's mom goes, nothing has been officially revealed. But come on, this is the main character's mom we're talking about, so of course she's going to be an important character at some point, right? Well, there are countless theories about her, ranging from something normal like she was a regular Marine, to crazy ones like Crocodile being Luffy's mom. Yeah. However, Oda stated in an interview a long time ago that Luffy's mom is alive, but completely unimportant to the story, so she will most likely never appear. So my best guess would be that she is just a regular woman Dragon had a brief relationship with at some point during his journey. Dragon definitely wasn't a great father, but at least he saw his son in person, which can't really be said for Usopp's dad. You see, Usopp's parents are Yasopp and Banchina, and while Banchina was pregnant, Yasopp decided to leave her to follow his dream of becoming a great warrior. He did become one of the top officers of the Red Hair Pirates, but he completely forgot about his family. His crew even visited East Blue 10 years ago, but Yasopp still didn't think to check on Usopp and his wife. While Usopp was still a child, he looked after Banchina and tried comforting her by telling her made-up stories about Yasopp returning to the village, which is how his lying habit started. We don't know much about Banchina other than she passed away at some point while Usopp was still a kid. However, what's surprising is that neither she nor Usopp were mad at Yasopp for leaving them, with Usopp still looking up to him. There are still 20 different parents left to cover, and let's continue with Ace. He is the son of the Pirate King Gold D. Roger and Portgas D. Rogue, but he doesn't really accept Roger as his father, which is why he carries his mom's last name. He also found his father figure in other characters like Garp and Whitebeard. Roger was undoubtedly the most successful pirate of his era, leading the only crew that made it to the final island of the Grand Line. Considering how big of a threat Roger was to the world government, it's understandable that once he turned himself in, they spent 9 months looking into every woman who had a connection to Roger in order to make sure he wouldn't have any children. One of those women was Rogue, who carried Roger's child. We have absolutely no information about how the two met, but what's interesting about Rogue is that she somehow managed to hold Ace in her womb for 20 full months before giving birth. She died immediately after, but her actions cleared Ace of any suspicion of being Roger's son, which allowed him to lead a normal life. Well, sorta. And even though Ace didn't have a good reason to hate Roger, the hate Sabo's parents get is completely valid. Outlook III and Didit are the nobles of Goa Kingdom, and the only thing they wanted out of their son was for him to maintain the family's reputation. Sabo hated everything about the nobles and their lifestyle, and preferred to play out in the trash heap with Ace and Luffy. This prompted his parents to adopt Steri and craft him into a perfect son. This way of parenting was what drove Sabo to escape the island and get almost killed by a celestial dragon. As you could guess, Sabo's apparent death didn't faze his parents at all. This is because they were too busy preparing their new son for an arranged marriage to boost their image. While we don't know how Outlook and Didit are doing now, we know that Steri became the king of Goa Kingdom, so it looks like they got what they wanted in the end. Judge Vinsmoke and his wife Sora are the parents of Sanji, and their relationship is pretty complicated. Judge is a ruler of the Germa Kingdom, but he is also a scientist who used to work with some of the greatest minds the world has seen in a group called MADS. Using his knowledge and technology, he started experimenting on his soon-to-be quintuplets to turn them into emotionless superhumans. Sora, Sanji's mom, was against this, but couldn't stand up to Judge, so she started taking medicine in secret to combat these modifications. Thanks to the medicine, Sanji ended up being the only child to be born normal, while his his other 4 siblings turned out just how Judge wanted them to be. After giving birth, Sora lived for a few more years before dying due to the side effects of the medicine she took. Due to these emotions, Judge saw Sanji as a complete failure, so much so that he faked his death and intended to keep him as a prisoner until the end of his life. However, his sister Reiju helped him escape. Many years later, Judge remembered that Sanji was still alive, so he arranged a marriage between him and Big Mom's daughter in order to expand his kingdom and influence. After that failed, Sanji ended up saving Judge and all of his siblings from getting assassinated. Recently, Judge has teamed up with Caesar Clown, and together they formed Neo-Mads, a science group that aims to surpass Vegapunk, but considering that Vegapunk is dead, I don't really know what their goal is anymore. Now, if you remember Frankie's flashback, he was abandoned by his pirate parents when he was 10 years old. But the thing is, we never learned who his parents actually were. Well, what if I tell you that we already know a pirate who abandoned his son 26 years ago, which lines up perfectly since Frankie is currently 36. That man is Queen, one of Kaido's all-stars, who is also a scientist, which would explain Frankie's love for science from such a young age. Queen was a member of the research team Mads, but after it was dissolved 26 years ago, Queen kicked Frankie off the ship and went to look for a new group, which is how he joined the Beast Pirates. It's a bit sad seeing that Queen couldn't even recognize his own son, but it's also understandable since Frankie did numerous upgrades on himself and even changed his name from Cuddy Flam. And with Queen in prison after the Beast Pirates' defeat, the chances of them having a family reunion are 0, which is probably for the best. Oh, and as for Frankie's mother, we have no idea who she might be. Look, I swear we'll get to the actual good parents soon, but before that, I want to cover Yamato's parents. Kaido was a member of the Fearful Rocks Pirates, but after Rock's defeat at God Valley, he, like many of his mates, split off to start his own crew. Around 4 years after creating the Beast Pirates, Kaido met Yamato's mother. Although Yamato's mother was never officially introduced to the story, there are some compelling theories as to who she might be, which we will cover in a bit. Now, Kaido was a pretty bad parent, but he wasn't too extreme like Sanji's dad, for example, until Yamato started idolizing Odin and pretending to be him. This infuriated Kaido to the point that he imprisoned her in a cave and planned on letting her die there. This form of parenting, if you can even call it that, is what made Yamato hate Kaido to the point that she would side with his enemies and eventually help take him down. Ever since his defeat by the Straw Hats, Kaido's status is unknown. However, knowing it's One Piece, I guess he probably survived somehow. As far as Yamato's mother is concerned, the leading theory is that she is actually Gloriosa, the former empress of Amazon Lily. You see, we already know that she was afflicted by love disease earlier in her life and has escaped to Amazon Lily to avoid it. From the looks of it, Gloriosa went back to Amazon Lily while Yamato was really young, which makes this theory plausible. There's also this panel where we see that strength is beauty on Amazon Lily. And do you know who is one of the strongest beings alive? Yep, Kaido. So, although we can't know for sure, Gloriosa being Yamato's mom is certainly possible. And there are more great parent theories like this, like for Nami and Zoro, for example, but before we get to those, let's continue with Weevil. There's a lot of debate about Edward Weevil and if he really is Whitebeard's son. So let's take a look at some facts. Buckingham Stussy and Whitebeard were both crewmates on Rock's ship until they went their own ways 38 years ago. Considering Weevil is 35 years old, the chances of Whitebeard being his real father are rather low, since the crew was already disbanded by then. However, what if Whitebeard actually is his father, but in a more weird way? Let me explain. As we already know, Mads did create a successful clone of Stussy, so it's very possible that Weevil is a clone too, created with Stussy and Whitebeard's DNA. Stussy only revealed that Weevil is Whitebeard's son after Whitebeard was already dead, and this is likely because she was scared of Whitebeard denying those claims if he was still alive. Anyway, Stussy tried using Weevil to get her hands on Whitebeard's fortune, but that plan was a complete failure. Upon arriving at Sphinx, Weevil tried protecting the villagers from the Marines instead of looting the place for himself, and he eventually got defeated and imprisoned, leaving Stussy alone, helpless, and worst of all, broke. It's pretty ironic that Doflamingo's parents were some of the nicest in the story, but they still ended up having terrible endings. So the Don Quixote family were celestial dragons living literally on top of the world, only interacting with humans when they used them as slaves. However, Homing and his wife weren't like that, which is why they decided to throw away their title and go live normal lives among other humans with their 2 kids, Doflamingo and Rosinante. They were doing fine for about a day until people caught on to who they really were, which is when chaos emerged. Their whole house was destroyed and people were even ready to kill them. So Homing took his family far away to live in a small cabin. His wife, who was never named, was already sick by then, and because they had no one to turn to for help, she passed away. But even worse, the cabin people found out where they lived again and came to torture them. Doflamingo's hatred for his father kept growing and growing as he blamed him for renouncing their titles as celestial dragons. Eventually, he completely snapped and shot Homing, hoping that killing him would return him to his old life. Momonosuke and Hirori were children of a legendary Wano samurai, Kozuki Oden, and his wife, Toki. Oden was a problematic, chaotic person from a young age, with his dream being to leave his homeland and go on an adventure. This dream came true when the Whitebeard pirates visited Wano, so Oden jumped into a fight with Whitebeard and then sweet-talked him into joining the crew. But before he officially joined the crew, he saved a girl named Toki from a bunch of slave traders. Toki was born during the Void Century, but she ended up in the present time by using her devil fruit to send herself into the future. Anyways, she came aboard Whitebeard's ship with Oden too, and the two developed a romantic relationship. Just 2 years later, their first son, Momonosuke, was born, and 2 years after that, Hirori was born. As their journey on the seas continued, Toki fell sick, so she was left on Wano to take care of the children while Oden went for one last adventure. When he finally arrived back, everything had changed because Kaido took control of the island in his absence. Oden then made some bad decisions, and even though he was stronger than Kaido, he ended up getting killed. When Toki heard of this, in her last moments, she used her devil fruit powers to send Momonosuke into the future to ensure that the Kozuki bloodline would live on. Now, to screw up so bad that your own child ends up turning from a law-enforcing Marine to one of the most dangerous criminals is something only Garp could do. But then again, looking at how he was constantly beating his grandson, we can assume that he was even worse towards his actual son, Dragon. Jokes aside, we know absolutely nothing about the relationship between Garp and Dragon. However, something big definitely broke out between them for Dragon to quit the Marines and go on his own path. Interestingly, Garp doesn't seem to be on the hunt for Dragon as he was for Roger, so I'd say their relationship is most likely fine. Either that, or Garp is simply too busy eating donuts and being a badass to waste his time scolding him. One sad thing about this is that Garp and Dragon will most likely never meet in the show because Garp getting defeated and imprisoned on Hachinosu could be really bad news for him. Man, I really hope we eventually get some flashbacks revealing more about their relationship. Oh, and as for Garp's wife and Dragon's mom, we have no idea who she is. There isn't even a good theory. Only 11 more parents are left to cover, and some of these I bet you didn't know about. Like, for example, Zoro's parents, whose story starts around 55 years ago, when Zoro's grandma, Shimotsuki Furoki, and 24 other people escaped Wano and created Shimotsuki Village. Then, after some time, while living in the village, a swordsman named Roronoa Arashi met a woman named Tara, who was the daughter of a bandit. The two eventually fell in love and had a child together who they named Zoro. Not much else is known about Zoro's parents besides how they died. Arashi died fighting pirates, while Tara died from an illness. The interesting thing about Zoro's family is that we know of some other relatives as well, like for example Zoro's great uncle, Shimotsuki Ushimaru, a former daimyo of Ringo, who was seen trapped in the same cave as Yamato in her flashback. And in case you were wondering, yes, Zoro is also related to the legendary Wano samurai Ryuma, who lived hundreds of years ago. Nico Olivia was a brilliant archaeologist from the island of Ohara, the world's biggest library and research center. She was the mother of Nico Robin, and we don't know who her husband was. However, it's pretty clear that his death was what fueled Olivia to research the poneglyphs. Olivia was so set on getting to the bottom of what happened during the Void Century that she left on an expedition while leaving behind a 2-year-old Nico Robin in her sister's care. 6 years later, Olivia's whole team was captured and killed, with her being kept alive for questioning. Luckily, Vice Admiral Saul didn't believe that what happened to her was fair, so he let her escape. Immediately after, Olivia had to race the world government to Ohara to warn her fellow researchers to evacuate the island. However, the Marines and CP9 were right behind her and soon surrounded the island, initiating a buster call. Olivia had a brief reunion with Robin and was happy that she also decided to become an archaeologist. But she had to make a tough choice to send Robin away so soon after finally getting to see her in order for her to stay alive. Ultimately, Olivia died during the buster call, spending her final moments with the other researchers in the library, trying to preserve as many books as possible. Okay, that was definitely a tragic story, but something maybe even more tragic happened to Kyros and Scarlet, who are Rebecca's parents. You see, Kyros was a street thug who killed 2 people in an act of revenge. But instead of getting executed, King Riku put him in the Colosseum. He then told him that if he won 100 battles, he would be set free. Kyros would fight and win far more than 100 times, but he didn't want to leave due to having nowhere to go and everyone on Dressrosa despising him for being a murderer. He would stay in the Colosseum for 9 years and amass over 3,000 victories, until King Riku offered him a job as a guard for his two daughters, Scarlet and Viola. Scarlet kinda hated Kyros at first, but after she got kidnapped and rescued by Kyros, she fell head over heels for him. Now, they couldn't be together because the public wouldn't accept a princess being together with a murderer, so King Riku faked Scarlet's death so the two could live peacefully together in a secluded cabin. It's there that they had Rebecca, and Kyros couldn't be happier, finally having a proper life. However, everything changed when Doflamingo took over the country. Kyros did everything in his power to save the king and even lost his leg in the process. But in the end, he was turned into a toy, which meant that his existence was erased from everyone's memories. Shortly after, he saw Scarlet get shot and killed by Diamante. But the worst thing was that even his own wife couldn't recognize him in her final moments. The only thing he had left was Rebecca, so he stuck with her and raised her for the next 10 years, even though she didn't know he was her father. Thankfully, this story has a happy ending, as after Usopp knocked out Sugar, Kyros turned back to his human form, and Rebecca finally remembered him again. Then, even though he only had one leg, he avenged his wife by defeating Diamante, and once Dressrosa was freed, he and Rebecca finally started living together again as father and daughter. Now, Law's parents didn't get much attention in this flashback, but I still think it's important to mention them. Law's father and mother raised him and his sister in Flevance, the White City. And from what little we get to see of this family, they all lived a very nice life together. Law's dad was apparently the best doctor in the country, and his mother was also a doctor working in the same hospital. This meant that Law had two parents who could teach him medicine, something he was interested in from a young age. After some time, Whitelead, the ore that was only mined in Flevance, was revealed to cause a deadly disease. This turned the entire country upside down, with all of the bordering countries closing their borders or even going to war with Flevance to prevent the disease from spreading. Instead of trying to escape, Law's parents stayed at the hospital to try and treat as many people as they could. But unfortunately, the hospital came under attack and both of them were killed. The saddest thing about this whole story is that this disease was later revealed to be non-contagious, meaning that most of the senseless killings in Flevance that day could have been avoided. Next up are Shirahoshi's parents, King Neptune and Queen Otahime. They were the rulers of Ryugu Kingdom on Fishman Island, and besides Shirahoshi, they had 3 more children, Fukaboshi, Ryoboshi, and Manboshi. Otahime's goal was to immigrate the fishmen to the surface so they could live under the sun. Humans and fishmen both hated each other, so making her whole nation agree on this was something she worked on for many years, often holding speeches about how good it would be to live on the surface and how not all humans are bad. A golden opportunity presented itself when a celestial dragon, Don Quixote Myosgard, crash-landed into Fishman Island. After saving his life, and after a few days of negotiating, Otahime finally made him support the Fishman immigration. Just as everything was going perfectly, the petition box was suddenly burned and Otahime was assassinated by Hody Jones. Hody did this as he hated humans and didn't want this deal to go through. Afterward, King Neptune was left to rule the country alone, and what's more, he had to basically imprison Shirahoshi for her own safety because a crazy maniac kept throwing axes at her. After encouragement from Luffy and Jinbei, Neptune and Shirahoshi finally attended the reverie, which brings the whole country one step closer to living on the surface, just like Orihime wished. Nefertari, Cobra, and Titi were the king and queen of the kingdom of Alabasta and also the parents of Vivi. Now, Titi died when Vivi was very little, so she basically doesn't appear in the story. The only thing we know about her is that Vivi looks exactly the same as she did when she was her age. We can also assume that she played a role in raising Vivi to be so brave and loyal to her country. This later paid off when Crocodile took over the country and Cobra was helpless, while Vivi went alone to find help and fix everything. As for Cobra, he was a good man who cared for his kingdom and people even after their rebellion, knowing that they only did what they thought was best for Alabasta. Also, Cobra was related to someone called Nefertari D. Lily, which makes both him and Vivi the descendants of the D clan. Anyways, Cobra deeply respected Vivi and believed that she would be a great ruler of Alabasta one day, but that day came sooner than he expected. You see, during the reverie, Cobra had some questions that had been bugging him, and because he likes to know the truth, he decided to ask the 5 elders if they knew anything. This mistake eventually cost him his life, as Imu and the elders thought he knew too much. In his last moments, Cobra sacrificed himself to save Sabo and asked the boy to deliver his final message to Luffy, which is that the entire Nefertari family bears the initial D. Only 5 more characters are left, and I can't wait to tell you guys the theory about Nami's parents. But let's first quickly go over Big Mom. Big Mom's parents were never named, and we don't know anything about them. The only thing we know is that they abandoned her on a dangerous island while she was only 5 years old. And although that seems heartless, they had good intentions, as they knew they couldn't take take care of her due to her size and behavior. Plus, they knew Mother Carmel would take Linlin in and probably give her a better life than they ever could. That eventually did happen, although Carmel proved to be an even worse parent to Linlin as she only wanted to sell her to the world government to make money. If you watch the newest One Piece movie, you know that Uta is Shanks' adoptive daughter, and although we've never seen her in the anime so far, she is actually confirmed to be canon. Uta's real parents were both killed by pirates, and she was taken by them as treasure when she was only 2 years old. But thankfully for her, Shanks and his crew attacked those same pirates, which resulted in them unknowingly adopting Uta after taking their treasure. Uta would cry a lot as a baby, so Shanks would often sing in order to calm her down, which could also be where her love for singing started. Overall, Shanks was a caring dad to her and even offered her the chance to go to the music island, Elegia, and have more people hear her voice instead of just singing on a pirate ship, which she declined. After unknowingly unleashing Tot Musica and killing almost everyone on the island, Shanks decided to lie to her and have her believe that it was his doing so she wouldn't start hating herself and abandon singing. Even after Uta imprisoned thousands of people inside a fake world, Shanks still accepted her as his daughter and was ready to fight 2 admirals at the same time to defend her. It's important to note that not all events regarding Uta's story are considered canon, and Oda never confirmed which events really happened and which didn't. Speaking of Shanks, the recent chapters of One Piece finally confirmed the theory that he is the son of Figarland Garling. Now, Figarland Garling isn't just any celestial dragon, but the leader of God's Knights and also one of the new 5 elders. Now, for some reason, during the God Valley incident, Shanks was left in one of the prize chests. We didn't yet get an explanation as to why he was left there, but there are some theories. One theory is that Garling hid Shanks there from Rock Pirate's attack. Or maybe he was put there as a surprise for Garling since everyone knew he was going to win the competition. Whatever the case, Shanks ended up getting accidentally picked up by the Roger Pirates in a very similar manner to how he found Uta. After growing up and finding out that he is a celestial dragon, Shanks returned to Merijoa where he met his family for the first time. However, he didn't stay there for long and quickly renounced his birthright, choosing to live among normal humans. We don't know why he did this, but it's likely that he didn't get along with Garling very well, and also didn't like how celestial dragons do things in general. Anyways, let's just hope that we will get some more answers in the coming chapters. Before we cover who Nami's parents were, let's first quickly cover Chopper's. Since Chopper is a reindeer, his parents are, well, reindeers. They were never properly revealed, but we do have this image, which is likely of Chopper's old herd, meaning that some of these reindeers are his real parents. Anyway, his herd didn't like him because he was born with a blue nose, but after eating a random fruit, he turned into a human, so the other reindeers completely kicked him out for being a monster. After some time, Dr. Hiralook found Chopper on the ground bleeding after some humans tried to hunt him down and decided to bandage him up and give him some food. This doctor would become Chopper's real father figure and would also inspire him to become a doctor himself. For a full year, they would treat random people by causing even more problems and then running away until Hiralook realized that his illness was catching up to him and that he doesn't have much more time. First, he tried kicking Chopper out so he wouldn't have to see his father slowly dying. However, Chopper found out what was happening and went through all sorts of trouble in order to find a mushroom that could cure him. In the end, Chopper accidentally brought a poisonous mushroom, but Hiralook was so moved by his effort that he still ate it. Even before the effects of the mushroom could kill him, Hiralook died trying to save other sick people. And after he died, his dreams lived on in Chopper. Nami's real parents were never revealed in the story. However, we know that they lived in the Oikot Kingdom and died during a certain war. We'll talk a bit more about Nami's biological parents soon. Anyways, on one of her missions, a marine, Belle Mare, came to the kingdom and ended up wounded on the battlefield. However, just as she was about to die, a child named Nojiko walked up to her holding a baby Nami. Seeing them, Belle Mare mustered up the strength to carry the 2 kids back to Kokoyashi village and give them a new life. Afterwards, she quit the Marines and decided to spend her life raising the girls in a house on the outskirts of the village. They didn't have much money, but by eating only tangerines, Belle Mare could save up enough for a living. Or at least she could, until the Arlong pirates invaded the village, demanding a large amount of money for each person living there. Belle Mare could have hidden Nami and Nojiko in order to pay a smaller fee and pull through, but she couldn't bring herself to lie about not having kids, so she used her money on the girls, knowing that it would lead to her death. Now, you might think that we know nothing about Nami's biological parents since they were never mentioned for over 1,000 episodes. But that's not entirely true. You see, Oda actually planned on revealing Nami's backstory in One Piece movie Strong World, but he eventually decided not to do it. The main antagonist of this movie was Shiki, which led a lot of people to speculate that Shiki was somehow meant to be connected to Nami's backstory, or that maybe he was even her father. Another interesting thing about this theory is that Shiki escaped Impel Down 22 years ago, while Nami was born 20 years ago, which makes perfect sense. Click on this video next where we explain the entire One Piece timeline from start to finish. Go on, click it.